with Mirrors is a 1985 made-for-TV film starring Helen Hayes as Miss Jane Marple and was directed by Dick Lowry. When she is told that an old friend, Carrie Louise, desperately needs help, Miss Marple rushes to her aid. Upon arrival, she learns that apparently someone is slowly poisoning Carrie Louise. But when someone else is murdered at the house, Miss Marple finds herself in the middle of another mystery. Not long ago I reviewed The Mirror Cracked, which was my first exposure to Miss Marple in a very long time, and really enjoyed it, even though the character herself wasn't quite what I was expecting. And as I've been working my way through the trilogy of Peter Ustinov's television films as Poirot, I knew that around the same time, Helen Hayes was making her own short series of Agatha Christie adaptations. So I decided to dive into those before completing the Peter Ustinov saga with Appointment with Death. So first up, I gave 1982's Murder is Easy a try. While I knew it was not a Miss Marple story, it did star Helen Hayes. So I figured I should start there. I'm not familiar with the novel Murder is Easy, so it came as something of a shock when sweet little Lavinia Fullerton is bumped off quite unceremoniously in the first 10 minutes. And after that, we're left with a suitably dashing Bill Bixby as an amateur detective and computer expert, very cutting edge by the way, to solve the mystery. But then the movie gets bogged down in a dreadfully boring love story between Bixby and Leslie Ann Down. A while ago we had the misfortune of trudging through all three miniseries of North and South, and if I don't have to see Madeline again for a while, that will be just fine with me. So I decided to not do a full review of that film. I thought naturally next up would be A Caribbean Mystery from 1983. But here's what happened. My wife is currently in the middle of reading all of the Miss Marple novels in order of publication date. And since she just finished reading They Do It With Mirrors, once she heard that it had been adapted by Helen Hayes, there was no way we could watch these films in order of release. It goes against my grain, but I relented. Rest assured, I will be getting to A Caribbean Mystery very soon. I trust the two films don't share any characters other than Marple herself, so I think continuity-wise, I should be okay. Alright, now to this movie. As I mentioned in my review of The Mirror Cracked, I had a certain hope for how Miss Marple would be portrayed. And Angela Lansbury, while I really like her and I think that she's an amazing actress, wasn't exactly my cup of tea in the role. But here, Helen Hayes was exactly what I wanted. She's adorable and fits my image of what this character should be, rather than being a somewhat off-putting busybody. Here, she's a sweet, kindly, rather meek-seeming busybody. But what makes her so great is she pretends, quite convincingly I might add, that she doesn't realize she's a busybody. She just happens to be overhearing things, or puts in her 2 cents and then acts as though she's taken aback at anyone for noticing how canny she is. She's shown with the very book-accurate hobby of birdwatching, which is just an excuse to wander around with binoculars. The constant comparisons of people and situations to things that they remind her of in St. Mary Mead are always fun. She's always dressed in a variety of cozy cardigans and vests, and appears to the world as the sweetest little grandmother you've ever seen. But like any good Marple, she's very nosy. She's intentionally seeking out opportunities to eavesdrop, but again, her inherent likability disarms the people that she comes in contact with, making her a confiding ear for suspects to talk to. One of my complaints about the plot of The Mirror Cracked was how Miss Marple was at arm's length to the mystery much of the time. Not so here. Miss Marple is staying at the country house where the murder takes place and is involved right from the get-go. She knows the family that the case surrounds and they know her, so she's integrated really well into the story. And her being neck deep in it comes at the expense of my second favorite character in the movie, Inspector Curry, played by Leo McKern. Now, Leo McKern is probably most famous as TV's Rumpole of the Bailey. And while I've never seen that series, if his performance here is any indication, I have a feeling I'd like it. He is excellent in the film, and plays Curry as a very professional policeman who knows what he's doing, but his patience wears thinner and thinner as we go along. He and Helen Hayes have great chemistry. Their first scene together is hilarious. Curry is recounting to Miss Marple what he's all heard about her from a mutual acquaintance, another inspector, I believe. The list of terms used for her are very descriptive and funny, and her innocent reactions to them are priceless. I realize in these reviews of Agatha Christie adaptations, I talk a lot about the humor of them. And the reason for that is because it's what makes them so entertaining to watch. And it's not just something that screenwriters decided to inject. The books themselves are often extremely funny. I've been reading a few Poirot novels lately, and I very frequently find myself sitting there laughing out loud. Agatha Christie was a very funny author, and livens up even the most dastardly of murder plots. But at the end of this list of terms, Curry admits that Miss Marple is apparently very useful, and that sets up their relationship for the rest of the movie. While he initially makes it clear to her that he will not tolerate any meddling, it isn't long before he is letting her help. The two of them bounce ideas off of one another as the case begins seeming pretty hard to crack, and both actors play those scenes so well. In certain wide shots, the visual of tiny little Miss Marple talking to a taller, rotund man kind of had me wishing we would have gotten a crossover between Helen Hayes and Peter Ustinov's Poirot. Would it have been accurate to the books at all? No, but I think there could have been a great deal of excellent banter between the two master sleuths. Also in the movie is Bette Davis in one of her final performances. I think she only made another 3 films after this one, and I really liked her in this movie. She plays Miss Marple's old friend Carrie Louise, and she and Helen Hayes get some nice scenes to play together. Obviously, in real life at this point, she had had several strokes, so she likely wasn't up to a huge role, so it feels pretty minimal at times, but it was nice. What I really liked was she gets to play a fairly sweet old lady. Bette Davis was a master of playing quite acerbic characters. You know, compare this to something like Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. Why did I choose that one? You guessed it, Joseph Cotten in a nice villainous role. But after playing so many roles where she's a more volatile character, it was nice seeing a softer side to her. John Mills turns up as Carrie Louise's husband. And while I think he's a good actor, I've never been that crazy about him for whatever reason. So I wasn't sure if I'd enjoy him here. But I was very pleasantly surprised. He plays the role with some charm and with an undercurrent that makes you keep an eye on him. After you watch a few of these made-for-TV movies, you start to realize that it seems to be a big-name guest star who turns out to be the murderer most times. Olivia de Havilland in Murder is Easy is a great example. So I started to get suspicious of him for that reason alone. And I have to mention a very young Tim Roth, playing a borderline unhinged young man that lives at the estate as well. Other than those I've already mentioned, the rest of the cast is very enjoyable as well. I wasn't very familiar with anyone else in the cast, but they make a very good ensemble. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this was a period set mystery. And if it wasn't, there weren't any horribly dated 80s fashions or hairstyles to take away from anyone's performances. I love that it was a family-based mystery. Getting to see a whole family's history and tensions play out and boil over is always interesting, and seeing a detective stuck in the middle of it all is just great, because motives are plentiful in those stories. Which reminds me of Hercule Poirot's Christmas. I think that might be due for a rewatch and review come this December. The location shooting is again very nice. All of these stories set in England seem to choose an estate or village to focus on, and it just adds so much great atmosphere and realism. The director was Dick Lowry, a veteran of TV, although this was fairly early in his career. He's directed a lot of movies I've enjoyed, including Last Stand at Sabre River, a bunch of westerns with Kenny Rogers. He's not really a flashy, terribly stylistic director, but he tells stories economically and always keeps you engaged. This movie is well plotted and paced. The climactic scene was very well done, where Miss Marple is given the floor for the big reveal. Again, I'm not nearly as familiar with this character, so I wasn't expecting a big performance of explaining everything to the family from her, but I'm glad she got that, and Helen Hayes delivers it perfectly. And I should mention, this was Helen Hayes' final movie role. I think it's an excellent starring part, and she nailed it. So, am I a Miss Marple fan now? I kind of think so. I'm really looking forward to watching a Caribbean mystery, and we'll see if my wife has gotten to that novel before we watch the movie. This time around, she was a great help pointing out which aspects of the movie they got right and which they changed up. She was the one that pointed out that explosive car crash near the end was complete dramatic license. In case it wasn't clear, Murder with Mirrors comes highly recommended. Thanks very much for watching my review. If you enjoyed it, Please check out my channel, Hildebrand Productions, for more reviews. Adios for now.